Greetings. I'm Tawanda Jordan, president of St. Mary's College of Maryland, a liberal arts institution and one of only two public honors colleges in America. St. Mary's College, over 176 years old, is an amazing institution of learning. It was established to commemorate the founding of Maryland and its history. It's an honor to serve our state in this capacity. We have much to be proud of. At the same time, being located at a site that was part of the 13 original colonies can be a heavy burden to bear. That history is filled with both joy and darkness. In early February, the college opened an exhibition in our Boyden Gallery that was intended to help educate our students and the public about the college's relationship to slavery. The exhibition confirmed something that has been on the minds of many of us but rarely articulated. And that question is, did slaves ever work on the campus? Our college's archivist, Kent Randall, has been reviewing records and for the first time has identified a clear tie between slavery and the college. Kent reviewed the 1850 census. Back then, the college was known as the St. Mary's Female Seminary. He found that Priscilla Greenwell, the seminary's steward, was listed as having 6 slaves. Further investigation by Kent has provided unequivocal evidence that the slaves identified were the property of the seminary, not Priscilla Greenwell. We know virtually nothing more about these 6 enslaved individuals, creating an unfinished chapter in the college's history that is unsatisfactory on so many levels. Should we be surprised that there's a connection between this institution of learning and the institution of slavery? No, but I do think some of us had privately hoped that that would not be the case. The sad reality is that during that particular period of time, in this space, at this place, it was the normal circumstance. We now have something more to contemplate. St. Mary's College is getting ready to build a new stadium complex as a means to accommodate a new academic building. In conducting the required archaeological survey, we have discovered additional artifacts related to slavery, specifically evidence of slave quarters. While we did not originally own this land, it is our land now. As such, we must respect what we have found, educate people about its existence and relevance, and use the information to guide us in fulfilling our mission as a public honors college. What follows is a presentation that explains what we have discovered. First, you will hear from Chip Jackson, our Vice President for Business and Finance, who will relay how the work on the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium project led to these discoveries. Next, one of our faculty members, Dr. Julie King, who is a professor of anthropology and nationally renowned in her field, will explain what her team has uncovered on the land that is now part of the college, in a county and region steeped in a history of slave ownership. We're fortunate as a college to have historic St. Mary's City as a valued partner, greatly informing our thinking. We look to you to inform our thinking as well. We're planning programs and courses generated from these discoveries. But I would like to know your ideas for how we can best learn from and be respectful of the history we are uncovering. Let us begin with some context provided by Vice President Chip Jackson.
The new academic building Dr. Jordan mentioned will provide the college with much-needed new facilities. The new building will include our educational studies and music programs, new study facilities for our students, and a 700-seat auditorium to serve both the college's academic needs as well as support cultural programming for the community. Through a campus master planning process, the college evaluated a number of sites for this new facility. We chose the college's existing athletic stadium as the best all-round location. In addition to the new building, the project includes additional parking. And since we are displacing our current athletic stadium, the project includes a new athletic stadium. The new stadium will support 5 teams: the men's and women's lacrosse teams, the men's and women's soccer teams, and the women's field hockey team. To determine the best site for the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium, we evaluated a few locations on campus. The sites we studied for the stadium are shown here. These include the North Field across Fishers Creek, the field adjacent to Waring Commons, and the site of our current athletic practice fields. As you can see, neither the North Field nor the Waring Commons field are large enough to accommodate the new stadium. The site across Mattaponi Road on our existing practice fields is the only site on our campus that can accommodate the project. The college acquired this property in 2002 to enable us to locate practice fields here. This slide shows the initial concept for the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium. As shown, the new stadium includes a grass field for men's and women's soccer, an artificial turf field for men's and women's lacrosse and women's field hockey, a track around the turf field, a small building with dressing rooms for the teams, bathrooms for the public and other support space, stands for spectators, and a small parking lot. Prior to proceeding to design and construct new facilities, the college will typically perform an archaeological study of the site to determine if the project area contains significant artifacts. We follow federal and state guidelines for performing the archaeological work and always consult with both Historic St. Mary's City and the Maryland Historic Trust to develop the specific plan for the archaeological effort. For the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium, we engaged Dr. Julie King to supervise the work. At this point, Dr. King will now describe her investigation and findings.
Hello, my name is Julie King, and I am a professor of anthropology here at St. Mary's College. As many of you know, the task of surveying the athletic field complex fell to me, my staff, and my students. I would like to acknowledge Chip Jackson, Annie Angira, and Mari Schlesinger, who gave us the opportunity to be a part of this important project. And I'm especially grateful to Historic St. Mary's City for their assistance and acknowledge the productive collaboration we've enjoyed on this project. This slide shows a Google Earth image of the current athletic field complex. The red line shows the extent of the project area for the proposed Jamie L. Roberts Stadium complex. It's in this area that we did our survey, and here where we have uncovered some important archaeological sites and the stories that go along with them. Before we even put a shovel in the ground, we undertook background research, reviewing historical records and documents provided by Historic St. Mary's City. We also reviewed many of the oral histories in the college's oral history archive available online. And we reviewed everything that is already known archaeologically for this vicinity. While there had been almost no survey in the project area proper, again, that's the area within the red line, we did know of several archaeological sites in the vicinity. Just south of the project area, for example, and shown in the circled area, are the ruins of a farmhouse complex first occupied sometime in the 1750s. A chain of title search, that is, a list of property owners through time, showed that the first occupant of this farmhouse was Captain John Hicks, who had immigrated to Maryland in 1728. Hicks was a planter and merchant who had moved to St. Barbara's. That's the property's historic name in the 1750s. This 1787 plat of the area shows the house that Hicks likely built. You can see the house in this image as a tiny square with what appears to be a chimney poking above the roofline. John Hicks' ownership was followed by a series of owners, including his son and then the Makel and Broom families. In 1816, Hicks's old house, now 60 years old, was taken down, and this house, shown in the photograph, was built probably by James Makel Broom. This house is now gone. We then looked at work that had been done on the west side of Mattaponi Road in the 1990s. Archaeologists from Historic St. Mary's City had found a number of sites on that side of the road that they determined were probably slave quarters. This summary map shows the project area, the red line, with the Hicks Makel Broom house in the southwest corner. Just west of Mattaponi Road are an 18th to 19th century quarter and a second 1780s to 1830s quarter. Of course, Mattaponi Road is an old road and would have been there when these quarters were occupied. The question then, was there anything on the east side of Mattaponi Road within the project area? To answer this question, we began by establishing a grid of shovel test pits across the field. Each little dot on this map represents a shovel test, here excavated every 25 feet across the project area. You can see what a shovel test looks like in the foreground of the slide. These small circular test pits are about a foot wide and a foot to 2 feet deep. The soil from each shovel test is carefully screened for artifacts, and then the levels or layering in the hole are recorded. Using the data collected from this exercise, we can plot out what kinds of activities, if any, were going on in the project area. We wanted to collect as much information as possible, so in addition to the documentary and oral history research and shovel testing, we undertook some remote sensing. Remote sensing, using magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar to see below the ground surface, allowed us to anticipate features we might miss in our shovel testing. After several months in the field, we returned to the lab, where we processed all of this information, including it in a GIS database we built especially for the project. Now, this is a busy map, but it's important to study it so you can get a sense of what we are seeing in the project area. Recall the Hicks Maple Broom area and the quarters on the west side of Mattaponi Road. Now focus on the project area. Over the shovel test, you see what look like contours, some darker than others. These lines represent the quantity of brick recovered from the shovel test. The triangles represent nails, the circles 18th and 19th century ceramics, and the squares tobacco pipes and late ceramics. This map summarizes the findings from the fieldwork. You can see areas that are relatively clear and other areas that have clusters of artifacts. In fact, there are two large clusters, with one in the north-central portion of the project area and the second along the project area's southwestern edge. Both of these clusters contain evidence for quarters, with the top cluster dating possibly as early as the mid-18th century. That is, when John Hicks first builds on the property. That first cluster yielded 2,000-plus artifacts, some very interesting, including tobacco pipe stem fragments shown here on the top row, ceramics, a piece of lead shot on the bottom row, and part of a wine bottle seal. With this information, we went back to the surviving historical records for the site, including this 1829 Orphans Court valuation. Orphans Court records were created so that the state could keep an eye on a guardian's management of an orphan's estate. And if you look closely on this line, you will see that it refers to one log quarter out of order. We found a second record, this one dated 1834, and it refers to at least two other quarters, both of which had brick chimneys. If these are not the quarters in the project area, those quarters probably weren't too different from these descriptions, log with brick or wood chimneys. With additional analysis, we found that the ceramic types from the north cluster suggest the site was abandoned about 1815. Notice how we placed the red lines to capture the site's date based on the manufacturing date ranges of the ceramics we found. What's missing from this slide is whiteware, a hard-bodied earthenware first made about 1820, and we did not find any whiteware in association with this quarter complex, suggesting it was abandoned before then. Pressing a little further, we learned that in 1814, during the War of 1812, Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane of the British Navy made it official policy that slaves joining the British would earn their freedom. We know 49 slaves from nearby Souderley Plantation took Admiral Cochrane up on his offer. Given that suspicious ceramic end date of about 1815, did the Maple Broom slaves do the same thing? It appears they did. This list was compiled after the war as part of an effort by the region's planners to get restitution for the loss of their labor force, and all of these individuals came from the Maple Plantation, also called Broom because of a subsequent owner by marriage. The able-bodied men on this list were probably given uniforms and recruited into the colonial Marines, while their families were sent to Tangier Island. After the war, some of these self-emancipated individuals and families ended up in Trinidad, recognizable by their names, here Maple and Broom. Others, including Bridget Broom, the Hammock family, and the Pattersons, relocated to Nova Scotia. The people who took the British up on their offer were not the only individuals we have been able to trace. Names of the 18 people found in John Hicks's probate inventory in 1753 also give us some demographic and genealogical information. And John Makel's inventory of 1814 lists the people he kept in bondage, and some of these names overlap with those who sought their freedom. Taking this information, we opened a number of larger test units in an effort to see if there were any surviving features below the plow zone. By features, I mean foundations, fireplaces, root cellars, plantings, and so on. These units were distributed in areas where artifact concentrations were higher and where the remote sensing had suggested something beneath the sod. You can see the units represented here as tiny black squares. And let's take a closer look at this particular unit. In this unit, the orange or lighter soil in the upper right is the undisturbed subsoil. You can see areas of darker soil, possibly a pit, on the left side of the slide, and smaller roundish features in the center that may represent traces of plantings and possibly a garden. This map summarizes the areas of archaeological sensitivity found in the athletic field. Our work has managed to flesh out the history of St. Barbara's, and in a short presentation, I can really only scratch the surface. But I'd like to place these findings in a larger context in the time left. The archaeological sites we have discovered in the athletic field are both exciting and not that unusual at all. This is true because Southern Maryland was a plantation society, a society that depended on hand labor to produce tobacco, and much of that labor was on the larger and some middling farms provided by enslaved labor. My students and I have recorded many of these sites, including most recently, as you can see on this map, at Newtown Neck State Park and the Josiah Henson birthplace site in La Plata. As the historical documents we saw earlier reveal, these laborers typically lived in log houses, far but not too far from the planter's dwelling, probably not too dissimilar from what is seen here in an exhibit at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. The archaeology, however, at St. Barbara's and at these many other sites can reveal the ways by which these families resisted or otherwise attempted to control their situation within an unforgiving system. We already know that many families self-emancipated in 1814. The fragment of lead shot and the possible garden features suggest households provisioning themselves and perhaps, like laborers on many southern Maryland farms, trading or selling this produce. The condition of the ceramics appears to suggest these wares were not hand-me-downs and that the households living here shaped their own material identities through participation in the consumer economy. These two ceramic fragments are particularly intriguing, given that they have these unusual star-like impressions on them. In all my digging in southern Maryland, I do not recall seeing an artifact like this. So you can imagine our surprise when we learned two more ceramics similar to these two were recovered from one of the quarters on the west side of Mattaponi Road. If you follow the work of my colleagues in Annapolis, you know that it is not unusual for enslaved people to curate seemingly everyday objects for spiritual practices. This late 18th century cache in the Charles Carroll House kitchen in Annapolis included one such object along with crystals, buttons, and pins. The archaeologist at the University of Maryland interpreted this cache as part of a ritual for coping with enslavement. A colleague at the Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum has pointed out to us that this motif may be associated with Anansi the Spider, a trickster figure in African and Caribbean folklore. In Africa, Anansi is a shapeshifter whose misdeeds and efforts to undermine society actually serve to strengthen social bonds, in this case among the Akan of Ghana. In the Caribbean, however, Anansi was put to work as a resistor, undermining the plantation system and its authorities through, for example, work avoidance and self-emancipation. Could these delicate star-like designs represent the spider webs of Anansi, with the individuals in these quarters drawing on him to cope with enslavement? Much research remains to be done, but the rarity of the ceramic type and design suggests that something might be going on. Such practices can be hard to discover because they would have been kept hidden from the eyes of enslavers. Archaeology provides one way to try and document what my colleague Barbara Heath describes as hidden lives. Slavery's essential and overarching attribute was the legal taking of freedom, but its experience across time and space, including on the maple and broom plantations, varied, and included strategies of resistance in the ongoing struggle for freedom. These archaeological sites have much to offer about African American and American history.
Thank you, Julie. That is a fascinating and informative overview of the history of this site. I will now review how the college has taken the information provided by Dr. King and her team and, in consultation with Historic St. Mary's City and the Maryland Historic Trust, are addressing the archaeological findings related to the proposed new Jamie L. Roberts Stadium. As you can see on this slide, the stadium, as initially envisioned, sits directly on top of the two slave-dwelling sites that have been found. The college has a long history of working with care to address archaeological resources in the development of new campus facilities. In developing our campus, our overall goal is always to minimize, to the extent practical, impacts of construction to significant archaeological sites. Specifically, where significant archaeological sites may be impacted by construction, our approach is to, first, adjust the design to minimize disturbances to the artifacts. And second, where we will need to disturb artifacts, we have the archaeologists do additional excavations to recover the artifacts prior to construction. It is within this framework that we have relooked at the plan for the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium. As shown here, we are proposing to move the stadium to the southeast in an effort to preserve most of the archaeological sites. Where some overlap remains, we will endeavor to minimize disruption of these artifacts. Overall, this revised site plan allows us to move forward with the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium while being respectful of the history of the site. It also provides an opportunity to commemorate that history. On this slide, we show the refined design for the stadium. As you can see, we have pushed the grass soccer field even further to the southeast to lessen its overlap on the 18th century slave-dwelling site. The parking lot, as shown here, is nestled between the two archaeological sites, and the walkways to the stadium and the stadium itself greatly avoid the archaeology. As we think about the stadium and our plan for minimizing impacts, it may be useful to understand that our approach for addressing the archaeology here is consistent with how we have addressed archaeology in other parts of our campus. This slide shows that our St. Mary's College campus includes many areas of archaeological significance. The college was founded as a living monument to Maryland's first capital at St. Mary's City. The extent of archaeological sites on our campus is indicative to the rich history of this place. As you can see, we have grown our campus with great care, embracing our history and being excellent stewards of the land we are fortunate to occupy. Anne Arundel Hall, recently completed last summer, is an excellent example of how we integrate archaeology into our thinking as we plan new facilities. This piece of land is located close to the townlands of Maryland's first capital here at St. Mary's City. After developing the initial idea to raise the existing building in order to replace it with a modern classroom and research facility for both the college and the museum, our first step was to complete an initial archaeological survey of the site. As you can see, the project was designed around the areas of highest archaeological significance, while allowing construction in areas of medium archaeological significance. Also, across Route 5, you can see that we constructed the Millfield parking lot over two areas of high archaeological significance. Here, we constructed the new parking lot on top of the archaeology, preserving in place the resources in the ground. This slide shows the typical process by which we integrate archaeology in the planning for new construction. The approach we took at Anne Arundel Hall and are now taking at the site for the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium is consistent with our values as Maryland's Public Honors College, founded at the site of Maryland's first capital. To illustrate this point, we have recently been awarded a Stewardship Award from the Maryland Historic Trust that recognizes our efforts to achieve our goals for providing modern facilities for the college while also being responsible stewards of the archaeological sites on our campus. We hope this review is helpful in understanding the history of the site for the Jamie L. Roberts Stadium and how we will respect the area by greatly avoiding most of the areas with archaeological significance.
Thank you for taking the time to let us share these important discoveries. Our intention is to be transparent, sharing information in a helpful and sensitive way. As do all aspects of our nation's history, our past informs our present and our future. We want our students, those at the college now and those to come, to learn from the evolving information we are sharing. We hope it will broaden their personal growth and the compassion they have for others. Would you now take a moment to answer the question posed on this website? And that is, what are the ways for our college community to commemorate the history of this site? We look forward to having you expand our thinking.